All right, let's talk a little bit about Uranus moving into the sign of Gemini. This is a huge transit, guys. This is happening on July 7th of 2025. So after a long 8 years of Uranus being in its detriment sign of Taurus, Uranus is finally shifting into the sign of Gemini, which is mutable air. So Uranus will be in Gemini from July 7th until November 8th of 2025, and then we'll retrograde back into Taurus for a brief period of time, and then we'll be back in Gemini permanently on April 26th of 2026. This is quite literally a massive energetic shift because Uranus not only is in detriment in the sign of Taurus, now is moving into mutable air Gemini, and Uranus is much more comfortable in the sign of Gemini, and it really shifts the energy in a more energetic and fast-paced movement, or a fast-paced energy. Uranus is the last of the outer planets to shift signs. We had Pluto recently move into Aquarius permanently. We also had Neptune shift into Aries, and now finally Uranus is shifting signs. And this is a huge shift for the collective because Uranus is the first of the transpersonal planets, aka the outer planets. So Uranus is one of the planets in evolutionary astrology that we associate as a generational planet. So generations can be marked by certain planetary positions of the outer transpersonal planets. Now, a little brief introduction to Uranian energy. If you guys are not aware, Uranus is the planet of change, disruption, chaos. It's a very liberating energy. It's very rebellious, outside of the box. Some people refer to it as the higher octave of Mercury, or a lot of times it's referred to as the mind of God. It can be seen as different, strange, weird. Keep in mind that Uranus does rotate on a tilted axis. And Uranus typically spends about 8 years in a sign, 7 to 8 years in a sign, and it takes 84 years for Uranus to go around the entirety of the zodiac. So unless you're 84 years old or above, you have not seen Uranus in the sign of Gemini. Uranus is the modern day ruler of Aquarius. It is exalted in the sign of Scorpio, and it is in fall in the sign of Taurus, and it is in detriment, in the sign of Leo. Other themes of Uranian energy can represent major shifts in collective energy, breakthroughs in technology, breaking free from traditional structures. It represents science, the future, forward thinking. It's very ahead of its time. It's very rebellious. It's associated with the unexpected. So Uranus really has this energy of creating things that come out of left field. So you can never really predict exactly what will happen with Uranian energy, but it does catalyze spiritual growth nonetheless. It kind of shatters our comfort zones and gets us where we need to go. A lot of times Uranus is associated with sky energy or like lightning bolt energy. So it's kind of like pulses of energy. So it's not going to be all concentrated into one specific event. It's going to be pulses of different events happening throughout this 8-year period of Uranus and Gemini. Some shadow qualities of Uranian energy, of course, can be very restless. It has a tendency to disrupt our nervous systems, especially with this transit of Uranus and Gemini. It can be very detached and disruptive or destructive, all for the cause of rebellion or like backlash or the need for like chaos, right? It also has a tendency for like alienation. Sometimes Uranian energy can be associated with having like a superiority complex or a God complex. It can also be associated with an obsessive need for freedom or liberation. It's very nonconformist energy. It's associated with the sky, space travel, astrology, astronomy, the internet, social media, technology, social uprising, AI, and future technology. Now, this is only going to be part 1. I'm trying to keep these videos a little bit shorter and sweeter. So marinate on this energy for a little bit, and I will go further into this transit in the following video. I do want to mention a little bit about the history of Uranus because, of course, when we're looking at astrology, we have to look at history. The last time that Uranus was in Gemini, or the last several times that Uranus was in Gemini, to kind of give us an idea. Now, history doesn't repeat itself exactly, but these are themes that we can keep in mind. So a little bit about the history. The last time that Uranus was in the sign of Gemini was 1941 to 1949. What was happening in that time period? Well, that was World War II. There was also the unification of Italy. There was also the Russian reform, as well as China's reform and several other countries' reformation. This was the rise of TV and radio. This was also a big rise in propaganda and media manipulation, as well as advancements in air travel. This was also a big time for women's rights and decolonization. Now, the previous time to that Uranus was in the sign of Gemini was 1858 to 1866. This was a big time period as well. Of course, most famously, this was a lot to do with the United States, with the U.S. Civil War happening at the time. Also, the transatlantic telegraph cable, which was a telegraph cable from North America to Europe, was put in place at that time. Newspapers and political propaganda was booming around this time. Of course, we mentioned the American Civil War and the division of the U.S., as well as Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation and the expansion of railroads and transportation. And finally, the time before that Uranus was in Gemini was 1774 to 1782. This was a big time period in history as well. This was actually the period that Uranus was discovered, and it happens to coincide with the American and the French revolutions, the birth of the United States, and the signing of the Declaration of Independence. This was a huge growth in political literature, and the Treaty of Alliance with France was signed. There was also a lot of education reform around this time period. Now, this one's especially important for the United States because not only was the United States Declaration of Independence signed, so that makes this the United States Uranus return. So we will be going further into this in the next video, so stay tuned for those. Like and follow if you aren't already. Personal readings for astrology and tarot up at the link in my bio. Much love, y'all, and stay groovy.